Hi. You should be able to hear us now. Both of us.
Let us know if you can't hear us, please.
Yes. Yeah. We had the sound off for a little bit beforehand, but it should be fine.
All right. All right. Thanks for letting us know that you could hear us. I appreciate it.
Yes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just making sure everyone who wants to join is here.
Mm-hmm.
That should be. Okay. Also, thank you everyone who has followed me. For some reason, my alert notification has stopped working. And I apologize for that, but thank you, Anna and Asami Kosakura and everyone else. Let's see here. The Villainess 578. Adepta Arcanist. Thank you all. Queen Twinkletoes. Some very good names here, I'm just saying.
Amazing.
Yeah, some very, very good names here. Yurimori, Klandora, Yumikosaru, thank you. There is one more in there that I cannot freaking get to see properly here. Thank you all so much. I hope you guys are all excited for this panel. I know I am.
I mean, I am too.
Yeah. And I hope you guys are as well in the chat. Okay, it is now 9 p.m. for me. Well, or 3. Is it 3 it's meant to be? No, 2. 2 for the actual DazeCon stuff. Yes. Time zones, am I right? Virtual Spirit saying this truly was a Kagepro project. Yes.
I'm sure it was.
So, I guess we can probably start soon. Hello, ONG7 and the lower gecko. 4 a.m. pain, yes. Hydrate, yes, thank you. I'm going to take a sip of my water. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone.
I guess I gotta listen.
Yes. Capital Chirp, Twitch, and Kitty Chips. Yes, thank you. Okay, I guess we can get started. So, some of you guys might know us from 2 years ago. We did another panel about disability in Kagepro project, and today we are continuing our panels with women in Kagepro, agency and femininity in the narrative. I am the Fab Hawk, and my co-panelist here.
I'm Ninth Feather.
Yes. Let's see here. We can go over to the next slide here. We have an overview. Do you want to go with that first?
Yep. So, we are, as previously stated, Fab Hawk and Ninth Feather. We've been Kagepro fandom since we did the math. It was around 2014 when we both started. And we've been around here, doing the fan arts, doing the writing, but most importantly, doing some panels for the convention, and we're really happy to be back. As far as what this panel is about, I mean, the title really does say it's about agency and femininity in the narrative of Kagepro project. For anybody here who isn't too familiar with Kagepro, it's a Japanese multimedia project that started as a song series, then got light novels, a manga, a OVA movie, an anime, lots of different media after that.
Yep.
So we will have a portion at the end of the show where you can do a Q&A. So if you have any additional questions, or if we bring up something during the whole panel that you want to know more about or have opinions about, please hold them and we'll answer stuff during that time.
Yes.
Thank you.
We will. We might also engage a little bit with you during the panel itself, but we'll try to keep most of it to the end, as to not disturb the actual presentation, I guess. But yeah, no, we're very excited for doing this. So
One more thing, if we ever end up talking about, over each other, just know that we are not in the same time zone and we have never actually been in the same room. So we're doing our best using the computer technology. So, God willing, it won't fail on us.
yes, fingers crossed.
All right,
Okay,
you want to take
yes.
that next slide?
Yes. So before we start, or well, as a start, we're going to go through a little bit of a couple of definitions that we are going to use here for context of this presentation. So first of all, we're going to talk about agency. So knowing what we mean when we're saying that is important. Agency in context of literary work is the ability of a person or character to make choices and take action. Characters usually are active, passive, or reactive characters within their own story. An active character usually describes a character that takes action and makes choices of their own initiative rather than as a result of an outside influence. A passive character describes a character who do not make choices or take action and instead are influenced by the choices and actions of others. And reactive characters are characters who take action in response to outside forces, such as other characters. So these are all neutral terms on their own, as well as they're not gendered, but you can see usually a trend of maybe women being more passive characters in a lot of works and men being more active characters in a lot of works. Though we have other examples of that we will come up with during the series. And none of them are necessarily bad. Like, as an example, Ichigo from Bleach is a very reactive character, but he still does a good job of being a main character of a shonen series. So for the next panel, my next definition, ninth.
Yeah, so we're also, when we talk about femininity in the context of this panel, what we're talking about is having qualities that are associated in a cultural context with the female gender. Because we are people from Western fandom context who are analyzing something that's from a Japanese fandom context. Femininity is similar but not the same in both those contexts, so it's kind of important to keep that in mind. Okay, next term is fridging. Fridging is a term that comes from US comic fandom. It refers to killing a female character in a shocking way, primarily for the purpose of creating angst or a character development for usually a main male character. The term fridging specifically comes from the Green Lantern comics. Kyle Rayner's girlfriend was killed. The body was found in a refrigerator. It was quite traumatizing for people that were reading that comic at the time. Okay, we're also going to talk about some tests, quote unquote, that are used to evaluate the feminism of a piece of media. It's important to note that neither of these tests really by themselves can make a piece of media like feminist or not. It's a way of evaluating certain aspects of them. The Bedschel test comes from a comic that I can't actually say the name of in this panel by Alison Bedschel, and it's a measure of the representation of women in fiction that focuses on whether a work features two women who talk to each other about something other than a man. The other test is the sexy lamp test. This is a bit newer. It was created by Kelly Sue DeConnick, who's also a member of the Western comics creation establishment, and she wanted to note that if you can replace your female character with a sexy lamp and the story still basically works, you might need another draft. So we're going to be using all of these frameworks as ways of evaluating different characters within Kagepro and how they work.
Yes. We are going to start with our first character, Ene, or Takane. And we are going to do this in a similar way as we did 2 years ago. We are going to do case studies. So we'll go through a couple of the women. Not all of them, sadly, but we'll get to that. So, Ene. Ene is very interesting because she changes quite a lot throughout the story or like the series. From like her starting position as Takana and then how she changes when she turns into Ene. Yes, your beloved. I'm very happy you like Ene. She's great. Yeah, no, Takane does have very little agency and is quite passive in the story. Like, she's very boisterous and she, says what she thinks quite a lot. But that doesn't necessarily mean she has a lot of agency within the story itself and the narrative. Like she's active, like as an example, as you see on screen, she helps making a game in school, and she she interacts with people. But that in itself doesn't necessarily that doesn't really affect the story that much. But headphone actor is the point where she really kind of changes from a passive and reactive character, because that's when she starts making choices on her own to try and confess to Haruka, even though it is a little bit too late. Yeah, sadly. Takane builds Anna's personality and presentation around what Ayano told her Shintaro needed. So, like, as an outgoing girl, it pushes him to react, an active character. So, she's being pushed from a passive position into an active one. Enna is far more active than Takane. She is specifically trying to urge Shintaro to go out, to engage with people, and so on, to different degrees of success. As clearly she's been doing that for a while until the start of the story that we see, like the present time. And yeah, she's still very limited because she doesn't really interact with the physical world in the same way as Takane did. So Takane and Enna's different takes on femininity is quite interesting because they are both very similar but also very different from each other. So Takane is very, she acts very tomboyish, but at the same time she is you can clearly see she's a girl. She's not trying to be male presenting in any kind of way, but she is very rough. She engages with typically male-ish hobbies, or male hobbies that is seen as male, with video games. And she doesn't necessarily put a lot of effort into a lot of her appearance, but again, you can also argue that is because of her health problems and not necessarily on purpose. Anna, in contrast, is quite more feminine, at the very least in the way she acts. She presents herself to be a lot more cute, quote unquote, and she teases Shintaro and so on. So it's a very interesting dichotomy there and difference between them in one character. So the next character we wanted to talk about is Momo.
Yes, Momo, my beloved, also very interesting when we're talking about both agency and femininity, given the way her character's been constructed. So Momo is a character who's really active, but she doesn't have a lot of agency. She makes a lot of choices for herself without anybody really influencing her. But because of the consequences of those choices and some of the circumstances of her life, she doesn't have an awful lot of freedom to actually affect other people. It's it's the financial restrictions that are on her family, and then her the health issues of both her mother and of Shintaro kind of create the situation of them needing extra money that ultimately pushes her towards being an idol. And then after she becomes an idol, for anyone who's not familiar with idol culture, people who are idols in Japan have a lot of freedom taken away from them. They will agree to things like not being allowed to date, spending a lot of their free time doing signings and greetings, stuff like that. Overall, idols do not have a lot of agency, and this is very much something that the Kagepro narrative does show accurately with Momo. Within the restrictions that she has, though, she is more prone to acting, reacting. That whole terrorist incident that's during the inciting incident in the series, she's one of the most proactive characters there. She's over here making plans, trying to do things, trying to get them out of the situation safely. She's also the one who, when she encounters Hibiya, decides to, drag him around town and try to get him to cheer up. Stuff like that. She really is a character who likes having her own agency and making her own choices, but her circumstances within life don't always allow for her to actually do that in an effective manner. Okay, so Momo and femininity. When Momo is, acting as an idol, she's engaging in specific kind of commodified hyperfemininity. Japanese idol culture really sort of has this kind of perfect, but not quite perfect because then you'd be too special for the male people who are supposed to be watching idols kind of aesthetic going on. It's often very much hyper femme. It's often supposed to look like very innocent, very young. We could talk about the implications of that for a while, but that's not what this panel is about. Anyhow, when she's not working, Momo is still somebody who likes to present as very feminine, but she doesn't exaggerate it as hard. You know, she'll wear a nice, cute pink hoodie, but a hoodie, not like, dresses all the time. And it is worth noting that Momo is probably the character who is sexualized most frequently, both inside of the narrative and outside of it. Within the narrative, as an idol, of course, there's people that are looking at her in ways that are sexualizing all the time. There's also the way that Hibia goes around comparing her to a cow, which we don't really appreciate, but it's a thing that's there. Outside of the narrative, she's the one who's most likely to be in, sexy poses in the official art. You see a lot of her legs. She's posed in such a way that you can clearly see both her chest and her hips, stuff like that. It's often very, very objectifying. She's also one of the characters who's most likely to be wearing less modest outfits. So, yeah, with that, we kind of get into the way that Kagepro can simultaneously empower its female characters and also, really kind of objectify them. That
Yes.
said, we're wrapping up with Momo and we're going to move on to Kido.
Yes. Kido. Kido's very interesting because she changes a lot between like masculinity and femininity and like androgyny throughout like her whole story from childhood till post series. So for her, it does seem like the story is trying to use the feminine aspect of her as a way to show her growing up. Which is you can see that in several songs like Mecha Kushikord and She's So Word especially. She's like in the present quote unquote time, she's very very androgynous, like having a hoodie up, not really showing a lot of herself. Kano takes jabs at her for not being very feminine. But then in contrast, we see her being very feminine in the past, like before her family died and such things. And then in She's a Word as well, you can see as she accepts more of herself and grows up, she takes this more feminine aspects kind of and reclaims it a bit. But then, of course, you can argue whether or not Jin is using this as a way to show her moving past childhood trauma, which in and of itself is a trope in a lot of fiction. You can see it. You can see a lot of like S-class lesbians, which is a term, which I don't remember exactly where it's from. You probably do that, Nines.
Yeah, so class S lesbians is an idea that came out of sort of Japanese lesbian fiction starting in the 1920s. It's basically the idea that Japanese schoolgirls naturally have a gay phase and then they outgrow it and become part of heteronormative society again. You would see stories about schoolgirl lesbians where they would either grow up and stop having feelings for each other altogether, or they would die tragically because homophobia. Anyhow,
Yeah.
so
Kido's
yeah. Arc sort of mirrors that. Continue.
Yes. So you have that in her with her tomboyism and also lesbian and trans people is often can be presented like this within media. So it's important to just mention that she has a similar kind of story arc that needs to at least be acknowledged, and whether or not it is done on purpose or not, we can't really tell. We don't know what Jin is thinking. But yeah.
Gosh, we wish.
Though we can talk a little bit also about Kido and agency, because Kido is a very reactive character, which is very very interesting because she has a lot of responsibility. She is the one that's in charge of the Mekakushi gang, and she's the one that kind of leads them in the present time, but she's not really aware of a lot of the actual plot that's going on for most of the story. So even though she wants to act, if she had a chance, she doesn't have the correct knowledge and is so limited in the agency of what's going on. You could also argue that some of her lack of agency, among other things, in the backstory is because, well, she was a child and like her upbringing wasn't necessarily great with her family, and so on. And yeah, no, she often is very much a reactionary character, but not really out of her own volition. And out of the three phases we see her in, her childhood, her present time, as well as in the future, she is the most active in when she is more tomboyish. Next, we have Mary.
Okay, if Momo was a little bit complicated, Mary is even more complicated, but in like fun ways. So, Mary is the character who, within Kagepro, arguably has the most agency if we define agency as power. Her choices are driving the narrative. Her choices are, in no small part, why we have time loops going on. The thing is that while she has all this agency, it doesn't really seem like she wants it. So, when we first meet Mary within the narrative, our understanding of how much agency she has kind of shifts. We start out seeing her as a very passive character who's just sort of reacting to everyone around her. But by the time we get to the outer science events, it becomes very clear that what Mary wants and what Mary does actually has a huge amount of influence on the narrative. She is pretty reactive. For all that she has a lot of agency, she doesn't really use it until she's pushed to. She doesn't reset time until everybody is killed by the snake. She doesn't seem to enjoy having power. We see in like her introductory song, Kuso Forest, that she wants someone to come and save her. She wants things to be better. She wants things to be better, but not necessarily in a way that she has to be responsible for doing herself. It is worth noting that this is not necessarily a super unique thing. A lot of YA protagonists have this kind of I have a lot of influence and I don't want any of it thing going on. Percy Jackson is a very good example of this. It's interesting also to look at Mary as a sort of foil or contrast to Shintaro, because Shintaro also has a lot of narrative power that he has really no interest in actually exercising. And his reluctance to exercise his narrative power and Mary's reluctance to exercise hers are really what is kind of driving the time loops to continue. Also, just a side note, I don't know what the right spelling for Mary is. We just picked one.
Yes.
So please be patient with us. All right, as far as Mary and femininity, initially this seems like it's pretty simple, cut and dry, but it's not necessarily. Mary looks like somebody who's very traditionally femme, long hair, very high femme clothing, very polite and reserved, which is very traditionally associated with femininity in modern Japanese culture. When we talk about her having, when she's referred to in outer science, we say she's the queen, not she's the ruler, even though ruler or is also a perfectly real and valid word in Japanese. We specifically, Jin specifically chose a word that was gendered to refer to how much power she has over the time loops. The moments that she is least traditionally feminine seem to be the times when she is actively resetting time. Her hair gets short, usually her dress is kind of tattered, maybe there's blood on it, that sort of stuff. That said, when we actually look closer on the way that she presents as feminine, it is a little bit more subversive than we might initially give her credit for. The hyper-feminine clothing is primarily in the Lolita style, which Lolita fashion is a Japanese fashion trend that came out of a desire to avoid the male gaze and instead dress to make oneself and other women think one looked attractive. It's often deliberately desexualized and very much made for the female gaze. Also, it is worth noting that Mary's biggest hobby is creating and consuming BL or yaoi, which makes her a fujoshi, a word that in Japanese literally means rotten girl. So, while she seems like the pinnacle of femininity, in fact, Mary's relationship with that concept is a little more complicated than we can always give her credit for. Yep. All right, now we're going to move on to somebody else fun. Hiyori.
Hiyori. She is interesting. Oh, hydrate. Thank you very much. I will do that. Very good. Thank you. Hiyori is interesting because she is comes off first maybe as a sexy lamppost, and don't take that the wrong way. That is just the way the term is called. We went over this. Wait, she's not actually later a sexy lamppost. But there is a discussion to be had on whether or not she functions as one in most of the story. We will get to the most very soon. So, throughout most of Kagepro Project, he already functions as a narrative tool for Hebia. Like, that's the entire thing with the Heat Haze. She dies and he in a loop, and he dies in a loop, but he's the only one that gets out. And she is the main motivator for Hebia throughout the rest of each loop. So, that's like one of the first things we can compare her to. But then also, like, was she fridged? The fridge is specifically the one where she dies to further a male character's kind of story. And literally, no, she's technically still alive in there. But she is in practice, yes, because she is more or less written out as a character. Again, in most loops. Not all of them. Twitch streamer cancel on Twitter for calling you a sexy lamppost to 7.
Please don't cancel us. I am begging you.
Sorry, guys. That's way too funny. Give a moment, that was the rabbit.
No, you broke her.
Yeah. Breathe.
Okay, so we're talking about Hiyori getting fridged, and again, like in practice, but then the big thing here is the later time loops, right?
Yeah. Because we know in later time loops, there are time loops where she survives and actually gets out of the loop. Especially in the manga, which sadly I have not read in a while, and not all of it. So we cannot really go too much into it, but that actually goes in a little bit more, that she gains more agency in the loops where she's able to go out. We can also, I do want to make a note that she does have agency within the time loop in the Heat Haze. Because she is just as much as Hebia trying to get the other person out. How much she's able to do that and how much of like it affects is, you know, you can discuss that, but like she's active enough to try and do that. Also, wow, thank you all for the hydrates. 4 hydrates, thank you very much. Gosh, you're gonna drown me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you very much. So, yes, as I said in the manga roots. No, I didn't boil. Oh my gosh, guys!
It's all right. I took a drink, so that one can count, right?
Yeah, maybe. You guys are so mean. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I did need that. Okay. Thank you. No, another one in it! Potato, really? Gosh. You know what, I'm gonna drink the other ones afterwards when Ninth is talking so I can actually go and get more freaking water.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, no, as I said in the manga, she does break free a couple of times, but then sometimes still gets killed, or fridged, or possessed. So you still get a little bit of the fridge trope there. Another one, oh my gosh, guys. Okay, then we can get to the actual other one. Ayano! Ninefeather, your favorite character. And I'm gonna go get some water and chug some water. Okay. You guys!
So I'm gonna leave Hawk to get some water, and we're gonna talk about Ayano, who is, like Hawk said, very much my favorite. So, how much agency does Ayano actually have in the narrative? This is a surprisingly complex question, because the narrative initially kind of misleads us about how much agency she has. When we first see her Jinzo enemy, our very first video in the project, very first thing Jin posted, she kind of seems like a background character who's just sort of there as somebody that Shintaro obviously misses. Very much giving the whole girlfriend trope, not necessarily in the sense that we know that she's dead at this point, but in the sense of She seems to be there primarily as angst fuel for Shintaro. That narrative is repeated and reinforced in Tomei Answer. But as we move through the events of the plot, and specifically through the release order of the different videos, we get more information about Ayano's actual role within the narrative. In particular, Ayano's theory of happiness is a game changer. It recontextualizes basically everything we know about Ayano up to that point, and reveals that her death was not just, Shintaro wasn't supportive enough towards her, or didn't notice that she was depressed. It was a desperate last attempt to stop her father from murdering several of her friends. So, over the time, our understanding of Ayano changes from her being a passive character to an active one, but at the same time, over the course of her actual linear arc within the story, this changes. In her backstory prior to, when her siblings were adopted, she was kind of, just a very passive character. And as she became someone who took responsibility for her siblings, and later someone who took responsibility for her friends, she began becoming a more active character who was more working towards making sure that the people around her were safe and being willing to do what she needed to do in order to affect that sort of change. That said, even when I would consider her a relatively active character, she very much has a self concept of herself as very passive. That whole discussion between her and Takane, when she tells Takane what kind of girl Shintaro needs, she very much casts herself as not that kind of girl because she's too passive. One thing that is a little bit complicated with Ayano is that we don't actually know how much of this Jin intended originally and how much of it he wrote in later. We are never going to know because he's probably never going to tell us.
We just don't know.
We do not. Okay, that said, with the question of Ayano, we also get into Ayaki. For those of you who maybe don't know as much about the manga roots, Ayaki is a version of Ayano who basically turned herself into one of the snakes in order to give Shintaro a power that could ultimately allow them all to break out of the time loops.
Hydrate.
This version of Ayaki is like, she's created from a sacrifice of a female character, so in that sense you might think, oh, this is fridging, but at the same time she continues to play an active role by being, the power that literally allows Shintaro to move forward through the loops. It's also worth noting that Ayaki's sacrifice kind of subverts a lot of the tropes that Ayano, even after Ayano's theory of happiness, falls into. We see a lot of times with female characters in anime, manga, video games, TV shows, that they're, constant supports of the people around them, very family oriented, very passive, very kind of motherly. And Ayano very much fits into that. Ayaki does too in some ways, but she's more willing to be mean. She's often very mean to people she's angry at, and she's willing to attempt murder, which is a little bit less, traditionally passive, I would say. That said, Ayaki, for all that she's like, a subversion of a lot of the, very pure feminine tropes that we kind of see, is also somebody who ultimately has her biggest influence on the narrative by sacrificing herself. It does, however, a lot of what we know about Ayaki sort of humanizes Ayano and makes her seem more like a well-rounded person and less like a saint, which I think is something that's really cool.
Yep.
Okay, so Ayano and femininity. Ayano is somebody who presents as feminine but sees issues with her own presentation of that way. Again, the way that she talks to herself about Takane, she obviously doesn't think that she is the kind of girl who would, in this case, be interesting as a romantic interest, or is, sufficient against some sort of standard that probably she just built up in her own head. So she has, between her, like the Ayano that we see in the present loops and Ayaki, her relationship with tropes commonly applied to women in media is pretty complex. Her arc is very much centered around her family and her love interest. Her most important actions with the plot are sacrifices, but at the same time, her actions are like the inciting incident for like half the cast. She influences Shintaro, basically all her siblings. If she hadn't, done some of the things she did, Mary wouldn't have ever met any of the other main characters. Like, her death has ripple effects that travel through basically the entire plot line and through
and time loops.
Character.
So
Yes,
many
and
time
all the
loops.
time loops.
Yep.
So yeah, the thing again here is we don't know how much of this Jin planned from the beginning and how much of it he wrote in later. And again, we're probably never going to know. So with that, we're going to
Yes.
move on to our what we
Bonus
call a
round.
bonus round.
Yes. Also, just like thank you, Joyful and Undercon and Wicked Bean for hydrate. So I'm gonna do those.
Sorry, I'm currently not able to watch the Twitch chat as closely as I am the PowerPoint presentation, so I'm missing these.
Also, Rosalie, thank you, and Yumi Kusara also for hydrate. And Yuri Mori. And two from Underkin and Yuki yesterday, and one for Lower Gecko. Thank you. I think I have gotten all of them now. Oh no! Oh, another one. Oyster, and Zero.
Also,
Xeox,
now that I've
Xeox.
also now that I have been able to look at the chat, the color of heroes, I saw what you said, and I guess. For anyone that missed it, Ayana was just testing the fall damage in Minecraft.
Yep. Gosh, you guys are drowning me. I'm gonna chug the entire glass again. Wow, what a tsunami. Yeah, guys. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna chug the rest of the water and then we'll continue on.
Okay, that sounds good.
Ah!
Okay, why don't you just continue for now and you can catch up on the drinks after?
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, now we are going to it's fine, it's Maki. Like it's Usakumu-nuki. Sorry, I'm totally butchered that. Sorry. We're going to continue with the dead mom trope. Because a surprising amount of parents and moms are very much dead in this series. I wouldn't actually say surprising considering how the heat haze works.
Yeah, mechanically it just kind of happens like that, but at the same time we're here to do media analysis, not
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what else we'd be doing. Just media analysis. Anyhow.
Yeah. So, dead mom trope. There are several characters that fit more than others in this. So, like Ayaka and Shion, as well as Kita's mom, kind of fits it quite well. In the sense of like they are characters that have died before the start of the series. Even though some of them we actually explored a little bit. Kita's mom is probably the one that fits the best. Because she's not really one that we know much about, except like she's mentioned, and like we know maybe one or two facts about her. Yeah. And again, like there are many dead parents in this series as a result of the heat haze. So you know, this affects also a couple of male characters to some degree too, like you know, but in more the disappeared parents kind of way. So again, like Momo and Shinra's father, Kana's mom, other family members, they die out of the heat haze. Or like, you know, are trapped there and don't come back. We do have parents that are alive, yay! Like Shintaro and Momo's mom, and Hibiya and Hyora's parents, but they are barely there. Like we might see like a flash of them, but never really like properly. Yeah, Kana's mom. Yeah, let's not talk about Kana's mom. Interesting thing. Asami's husband worked quite a lot for the dead mom trope. His death is what urges actions from Asami, and that has repercussions for the rest of the story. Parents in this series just don't exist, honestly, says Calm Mialo. Thank you. Yes, that's true. So then we can also talk about Asami and femininity. Do you want to go ahead and do that?
Yep. Okay, so Asami herself is not a dead mom. She's trapped in the haze, but she continues to, like, we know she's alive and she has an influence on the plot, even if it's not a fully positive one. Her husband, on the other hand, is very much a character that fits into the dead mom trope. He dies when she's away, even though she has the power to protect him. His death is devastating to her and acts as a catalyst for her actions. And he kind of, it's not quite a morality pet situation, but he does very much act as her link to humanity and her reason for believing that, you know, humans are beings that she should care about. And this is often like the morality pet role or the link to humanity role is often very much a feminine role. You see, the gruff, angry dad and the like daughter or wife who's his only real reason for believing in humans. And this, in this case, is very much reversed.
As an
Azumi
example,
start.
Full Metal Alchemist is a very good example.
Yeah, yeah. Full Metal Alchemist. I'm thinking like Castlevania with Dracula also.
Yeah.
But yeah, Azumi starts the series with a lot more agency than like any of the other characters. She has like basically unlimited powers, but as a result of her actions over the course of the series, she ends up, trapped with basically no control over like the space that she created and the orders that she left for it. She can't undo what she did with the heat haze. She can just watch. And I just like to kind of point out when we're talking about Azami and femininity that the inciting incident for arguably the entire plot is Azami being like, I would like to create a happy domestic life with my husband and my daughter. And then it goes terribly wrong. And now we have, children dying.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, it's a very traditionally feminine coded urge, but ultimately the outcome of this urge is not something that is particularly gendered.
Yeah, exactly. So, then we can talk a little bit about 3 songs at the end. Kisaragi, Attention, She's a Word, and Additional Memory. Because they are very interesting songs, because they are all first-person POV and narrated by female characters with similar themes, but they're quite different, and they're used for very different purposes in the narrative. So, like, Kisaragi Intention is our first introduction to Momo, and it introduces the main conflict of her character arc, how she is, and so on. And it's a very kind of sad song, but ends on a very positive note. I mean, that kind of really fits Momo as a character as well. She's a Word represents the end point of Kito's character and really shows her character development that's happened throughout the story, which is also kind of a little bit sad, but ends also on a high note. Then, last, we have Additional Memory, which is the song that gives us a POV song from a character who's constantly shown from other POVs. So that's the song that kind of changes our perspective on a lot of things in the story. So it's less about her character arc and more about revealing her feelings and her point of view as a contrast to the rest of the series. So yeah, no, this is less of a comparison to how, like, if any point of this comparison, more like just pointing out that this is very interesting to see how the songs can be so similar yet so different. And yeah, that is honestly what we have currently for this panel. We don't really come to any conclusions here. It is simply more of a discussion, which we will now open up to our chat a little bit more. I can see also Connor Murphy doesn't exist. It's cool how similar Asami and Kenjiro are. Even both of them were influenced by the snake after Ayaka Tsukihiko died. Ooh, that is a very interesting point. I'm also gonna just put this to the bibliography. Do you want to make a comment on that, Ninth?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's very much similar things. I lost my spouse, and I'm going to destroy several other people's lives over it.
Yeah, that is extremely similar.
Okay, what's y'all's favorite femme character? Well, I kind of answered this, but Ayano.
Ayano, yeah, I think mine might be Takana. I really like her as a character, especially how she changes from Takana to Ene. Yes, these are sources. If you guys want to, we can probably post them as like clickable links somewhere, maybe on Tumblr. We can actually go back to the first my first thingy slide. Slide is the word. That's the word. Where you can see some of our social media, so we can probably see if we can post stuff there.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of role in femininity does Azumi hold? We see her as very masculine, emotionally, that is. Yeah, no, in the story narrative, Azumi sort of holds a masculine role where she's very active and, she has this whole narrative that revolves around like losing her spouse and going ham over it. But at the same time, like the way she presents herself is very, her clothing itself is very high femme, and the way that she sort of conducts herself is not she's not as tomboyish as some of the other characters. She's not, as like super passive, super traditionally Japanese femme, but she is very much somebody who doesn't actively try to project herself as masculine. She just has a masculine coded sort of role in the story.
Yeah, we said like her role takes up what is traditionally a masculine portrayal or like role in the story.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Also, thank you for the hydrate, Tamin, the artist. Continue.
So, okay, I'm gonna continue with that. What other ways does she connect to it like her granddaughter? Well, they both have very similar sort of aesthetics with the dresses and the long hair and that sort of thing, where you can be like, I'd say that's probably the biggest similarity between those two. I'd also kind of like to address what Antironin, I'm probably pronouncing that very wrong, Interior Den, says about why is it always Catholic schoolgirls. That's our source for the stuff about S-class lesbians, because in anime you may notice that a lot of schoolgirl romances, especially ones that are like from before the last decade or so, are set at Catholic schools, and there's a reason for that, and it's that it was a trope in Japanese literature before it ever made it to anime.
Yes. Also, Chris Machine Gover. Yes, it's well. I'm going to put this VOD here on my Twitch, and I believe DazeCon is also going to upload it in an archive, which you can access later on YouTube or from the DazeCon website.
Yeah, no. Our panel from 2 years ago is up on the DazeCon like YouTube channel, and this panel will probably be uploaded in the same way.
Yes. Yuffie Me, I love the bitterness of additional memory. It's a terrific reminder that Ayano is super flawed and also a teenager who doesn't know what else to do. Reality reflect in how it's a rock song rather than a ballad, like Theory of Happiness. Ooh, yes.
Yeah, no, I very much like that choice.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting to see how some of the just like genres of the songs are quite different and what kind of story and theme they all do. And also, NGL, sometimes Hero is a badass. Yeah.
And no, one thing there's an interview, you can find some quotes from it on the Kagepro wiki, where it's like Jin is saying that Hiyori is in fact such like an active character that I thought if I let her get involved in the plot earlier, she might have just taken it over. And I think that's very interesting, like from another perspective.
Yes, I think so. And I mean, you can see that in the anime and in some of the other things as well, when she is with Hibiya and Konoha, she makes her opinions known. Like, she's very a bossy girl. She does things. She doesn't just sit around. So it very much sense that the plot removed her. If not, she would have done stuff. Kind of like Momo, actually, as well. That Momo does things when she can. Also, 4 more hydrates. Thank you very much, the Lower Gecko and Sio. And Kamakura and Haibara Chiman. Thank you. Continue. You can read one of the more comments, Ninth.
Yeah, so what's your take on Shion and her connection to femininity and agency? I think she's an interesting character, and I love Gunjo Rain. We didn't talk about Shion as much as we might have. I think the thing with Shion is that she very much, like, a lot of her story, in similar ways to Ayano, revolves around her family, revolves around, first like trying to keep Mary safe and ultimately, sacrificing herself for that purpose. So she has agency, but a lot of the agency she chooses to use in ways that ultimately involve sacrifice. So she fits into some unfortunate tropes involving female characters, but at the same time she is really interesting, and I wish we got more of her in canon.
And also, like, it's very interesting that Shion's sacrifice is for a family member. It's not like for another male character to further their plot. Yeah, because Mary doesn't really do much for a while after that. Like, she stays in the forest. Kitty Chip, Sarah and Oisteel, thank you for hydrate. Also Rosalie again, thank you.
And yeah, I think at this point we're good on the hydration. Thank you guys.
No, I'm not thirsty, Rosalie. Thank you all very much. I'm very sorry that my notifications for follow also has stopped working for some reason. Can I click it and make it happen? Maybe. Doesn't seem like it. Sorry, guys, but thank you all for all of the freaking follows, like Pride and Potato, and who else? Oh gosh, there's so many. Thank you. I appreciate it all. It's just like the overlay does not let me look at them very well. One Darth Year, Famil, Famitalians, Hero King, Medusa, the Lower Gecko. Thank you all. I know there's one other one in between there that I cannot read properly.
Okay, so Ji Yonling, which I'm probably mispronouncing again, saying you're thinking about the fact that many characters have a protagonist role in the project. It makes a bit of sense to think that key decisions, actions, etc., are kind of spread out through all the characters. So it makes it feel like a given character isn't incredibly active. You're kind of off the top of your head. I mean, that does make sense, and it's like a lot of characters, their actions, like, constrain or affect the actions of other characters, which is kind of why, like, when we're talking about Momo, a big factor in her life is the fact that, Shintaro is a hikomori. And then alternately, when we get, um, like a lot of the characters' decisions do make a big influence on how the other characters act. So that is a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could argue most, if not all, of the kids are some way main characters or have a different focus and to different degrees. So should they all be active or not? I mean, you can kind of go back to the example I made earlier with Bleach. Ichigo is not an active character. He's a reactive character, but he's still a protagonist.
Yeah. While we were talking about that, there was another example, which is a very active protagonist is the protagonist of the Shakespeare play Othello. He's so active that he gets himself and everyone around him killed. So being active is not necessarily a guarantee of being a good protagonist.
Yeah. So, which is very interesting because normally, like, a lot of people, I think, see active characters equals a good character, but that's not always true. Because that's not always what a story want to tell. Like, sometimes this, like, a story might not be about the characters. Sometimes a story might be about the setting. So you don't necessarily need active characters there.
Yes. Okay, so Gap Pink 2 is saying, I do like how Jin chose to have characters like Ayano and Hiyori show more complexity in the manga route.
Yeah.
I 110% agree.
No Absolutely. I think this series has had the ability to do in because of how it's been presented with having different routes and like releasing canon material throughout like over several years, is that you can start with a character being very simple and then develop them over time, and especially since you have the loops, you can explore them in different ways throughout the different loops as well, with having different reactions in different settings, even though the timeline is kind of the same. Usaku Manuki. I watched a similar video analyzing female characters in Arcane and their agency. Oh, I think I might have seen that video actually. I forget his name, but I'm pretty sure I know which one that is, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, Arcane in general is good. Would recommend.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Ji Yongling is saying passive does not equal negative. Sometimes you want a story that talks about how a person reacts when things keep happening to them. Yeah. I mean, like, metamorphosis is basically just, Gregor wakes up as a giant bug and everybody is reacting. Like, there's not a lot of active choices that are made in that narrative. Yep. And yet, it's a very good story.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, Henry Game 11 saying there is flat and round characters. Yeah, and again, having a flat character is not necessarily itself a bad thing. Most stories do not have time to develop every single character into a hugely rounded character. Sometimes you do need somebody who can be in the background sweeping, or can check someone into a hotel, and they don't necessarily need that level of development.
Honestly, I would an example I can kind of argue for is Caduceus from Critical Role, because he doesn't like he's not a bad character. He's a very good character and stuff, but he doesn't really change.
No,
Despite like
he
what
doesn't
happens
change
throughout the plot, he affects the plots to a degree, but the plot doesn't really affect him and change him. But that doesn't make him a bad character.
No.
Wicked Bean. Do you guys think that this snakes hold some sort of femininity and agency because their main roles are to make the wishes of their holders true, even if it isn't very good for the characters like Momo? Ooh. I mean, they do exist specifically to grant wishes of someone else, so in that sense you could possibly argue that they have some femininity, and especially considering Mary is the like queen snake, so there is at least some sort of femininity attached, at least like wording wise.
And in terms of agency, I mean, ultimately, another main instigating factor in the story is that this Snake of Cleary Eyes is like, I'm going to have some agency. I'm not going to have agency towards anything positive, but I am going to start making my own decisions instead of listening to Azami or whoever my current holder is.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to do the last text here. Gub Pink 2, another person in chat mentioned the connection between Mary and Alice in Wonderland in her character design. Your thoughts? She's very much an Alice in Wonderland like character design wise, very much, absolutely. It might in part be because of how much you have that motif in a lot of Japanese media. You see it a lot, but I mean, you could also argue that some of her character traits might relate a little bit to Alice as well.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Alice in the story is very much a reactive character, but she is active. Like, Alice is curious. She wants to get into trouble. Mary is, quite frankly, a lot less trouble than Alice is in the books. There's also, like, thematically, the whole nostalgia part of Mary's arc, where she's like, I want to go back to those days, is very much an attitude that runs through, especially through the Looking Glass.
Salmon! Okay.
Anyhow, I've been interested in Alice in Wonderland since I was like 7.
But yeah, I see that we are nearing the end of our panel, and there are some really cool stuff that's going to happen very soon in the DazeCon. If people want to join that, I believe we have the Dub and Flubs Mecha Cookie City Actors fan dub, as well as the draw meet is going to start up very soon. Both me and I will continue to be on panels, or not on panels, be in the Discord chat. So if you guys want to continue chatting about this, we are very much open for that. This is I would like to sit here for another hour and discuss this with you guys, but sadly we have to continue.
Yes, and also eventually you have to go to sleep.
Yeah, you live in Europe. Kitty Chips, as well as Rosalie, both gave me Hydrate and Wicked Bean. Stan Momo, we have a good DazeCon. Yes! Thank you guys for coming to this panel. We have had a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed our panel. Tamin, I'm happy to finally be here for a DazeCon instead of a recap. Thank you very much. We loved that you guys could join.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
Any last things to say before we get going?
Well, Yumiko, sorry, what with your drink, so.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing.
Thank you very much.
So we're gonna wrap up here so that you guys have some time to transition to the next thing. And if anybody here is like basically if you need a couple minutes to like take a break before you start your next session, then you'll have that.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you coming. Please have a good rest of the con and a good rest of the August 15th.
Yes,
watch out for trucks, y'all.
Yes, watch out for all of the trucks. Thank you, Wellness, for to hydrate. Thank you. And thank you all of you guys for all of the follows. You guys have been amazing. And we will see each other soon in the Discord chat. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.